I want to welcome I want to welcome you, Caroline, to this interview. Thank you for doing this, and let me introduce you first. So we today we have an interview with Caroline DePalatis. Did I say it right? DePalatis was it
Yes,
right? Yeah, DePalatis, who
right.
has worked in the field of international education and service for 25 years. And with her family, she is developing Your Global Family, which was formerly Culture Weave, a venture to help parents raise their children to be globally smart and engaged citizens through education, community, and adventure. And Caroline is also the author of Jumping Out of Mainstream, an American Family's Year in China, and a top writer in short story and travel on Medium, now enjoying 2,500 followers and growing daily, which is really impressive, I think. So I'm really honored to have you on my podcast, and I have so many questions for you. I think this is such a great cause you're pioneering for, and I'd like to start with intercultural communications and how you stumbled upon
Sure.
that topic and why you decided to build a whole venture around it.
Okay, that's a great question. Well, I think you tend to go towards things that you have experience in. Well, first of all, even before I answer that question, I just want to thank you for this opportunity today, Diana. I think you tend to go towards what you have experience in, and I have always, really since I was a child, had a deep interest in other cultures, other people, other lands. I always was looking outside of my little world. This started probably when I was about 10 years old. I was fascinated by maps. When I was in my teens, my family took a trip in the Caribbean, and it was the first time that I was actually exposed to extreme poverty in Haiti. That was a very impacting moment for me. I ended up going and studying international relations in college, in university, and always kind of thought that I would become a diplomat or an ambassador. Well, after I graduated from college, I worked in the field of international development for a little while, but things changed when I ended up meeting a man. uh, I have been married for over 30 years now, and
Wow.
we met in college. He was a graduate student, I was an undergrad, and um, we both have a fascination with other people, other cultures, languages, and so on. And so it's just been sort of a natural progression. We spent our first 2 years of marriage living overseas in Japan. And I should say that I am fluent in Japanese. I've worked as a translator and interpreter in Japanese and English. I also know some Chinese as well.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, my Chinese is much lower than my Japanese, but yeah, I can communicate some things. Anyway, we always envisioned we would spend our lives living overseas and raising our family there, and that didn't actually happen. Life has a way of taking you by surprise, and we ended up staying most of the time in the U.S., but we got involved in an international student outreach to college students. It is a Christian ministry, actually, and from the moment that we were introduced to it, we knew that it was for us, and it has been a part of our lives ever since. Currently, in the last 4 years, I've been working with international wives and couples and families in my corner of the world in Monterey, California, and it's just so intercultural communications has been part of who I am and what I do for so long. It made sense to try to focus on that as I'm developing something online, something that I hope will reach out to a much larger portion of the population. And one thing I would like to say is nowadays, to some extent, relating with people cross-culturally is kind of like breathing. I wrote an article about this on Medium, and it really got a lot of traction because we can breathe our short little breaths, not paying attention all day long. Or we can learn to breathe, like through yoga and other things, and really pay attention to the breath that's moving in and out of our body. And deep breathing really is healthful to our bodies, right? Well, in the same way, we can interact with people from other cultures and kind of stumble across things. But if we're intentional about it, we can really interact well. And there's a lot of that missing in the world. And something I've found when it comes to intercultural communications is there are either academic approaches or business approaches, but it doesn't seem like there's much just for the common person to get better at that. So that's what prompted me in that area.
Ah, that's great. And then you built this venture around it, which was Culture Beef, and then became your global family. And why did you decide to do that? And what does your venture do?
Okay, so, I'm in my early 50s, and there is something that happens to people. I know it happens to women when they're turning 50. It's kind of eye-opening. When you turn 40, you double it and you realize you could still be around as an 80-year-old. But when you turn 50, you kind of recognize, wow, there aren't too many people who make it to 100 and beyond. So you realize you're kind of past half of your life. I feel very satisfied with what I've done with the first half of my life. I have 3 young adult children. My youngest actually is 17 right now. But as I was approaching 50, I was feeling like, is this all I'm going to do? Am I going to do the same thing for the next 20, 30 years and then just die? And I realized, my husband and I were talking about it, I realized we've had so many amazing experiences. And sure, I journal, but I haven't really pushed those out in the world and shared those with people. And I feel like there's great value in the interactions we've had that really, true to what you do with story artists, really are stories of people that are perhaps kind of your average common people, but they're amazing stories. We hear stories about the Kim Kardashians of the world and those kind of people, but their lives may seem flashy on the outside, but there's a lot of really cool stuff that happens in all of our lives. And I'm just fascinated with the culture part. So I considered what I could do. And around this time, I happened to stumble upon a person named Jeff Goings, who is a writer and runs a very thriving group called Tribe Writers.
Yeah.
And I read his book, You Are a Writer, So Start Acting Like One. And even though I hadn't written all that much, I had written things in my job and I had kept a journal, but I hadn't written a book or I hadn't really blogged intensively. His book really resonated with me. And one of the things I like about Jeff, he's a friend now, one of the things I like about him is he's just kind of very real and authentic. And, he's just kind of a normal person, So I think that interested me. He didn't seem all plastic and made up and so on. So I started kind of following him. And then in the fall of that year, I think that was 2015 now, he was opening up his Tribe Writers course, and I said to my husband, I think this would be a really good direction for me to go. What do you think? And my husband this is great. And he said, and let's do the premium level too. And I was like, oh, okay, awesome. So I jumped in on the course, went through the course and started kind of just doing more. And long story short, I ended up going to the Tribe Conference. Jeff holds an annual conference in the fall in 2016. And that just brought everything to light. And last year I went again in 2017. There was a guy at the Tribe Conference who's one of the top writers on Medium. And he shared about his experience, as did another Tribe Conference attendee who was more like us, if that makes sense. She wasn't, she didn't have like tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of followers on Medium. And I thought, maybe I should try that. And there's a Facebook group that I'm in that promotes that. And so I jumped right on there right after the Tribe Conference and just very faithfully weekly started posting things there, and my audience just really grew. And so anyway, I think that there's a real interest and hunger in understanding this dynamic of culture and how we interact and how we, understand one another. But it's a little amorphous. I think the word culture is a lot like nature. If you were to Google culture, you can get everything from, Beyonce's latest release to tribal people in Papua New Guinea. It's so diverse. What does it really mean? And I'm hoping to clarify that a little bit more and help people understand that it's about human relations. On one hand, every single person is, and every family is its own culture. And yet there are certain things that we can see that are, more predominant in some cultures rather than others. So I'm fascinated with the way that these cultures interact. So what I built about 2 years ago, I launched Culture Weave with the express idea of offering a place where people could talk about cultural ideas. And, I developed this resource library. I kind of, I learned something in that experience. I don't want to say it's a field of dreams approach, but, sometimes you get very excited about building something and not everybody gets it in the way that you get it, Yeah. And what I've been learning in these last couple of years is the importance of really targeting my audience. And that's the reason why we're pivoting to Your Global Family. And that name came to us last fall. We were sort of doing a little rebranding exercise with a friend of ours who has experience in that. And we're really trying to hone in on who needs to know this stuff and how can we really be of help, if that makes sense. Jeff, in his course, one of the steps that he has is crafting your vision statement. And the format is every blank should blank. And the problem is, like, every dog owner should walk their dog. That would be a simple example.
Yeah.
The problem is with culture, I was stuck on that. As simple a phrase as it is, I was like, wow, everybody should care about this, but that doesn't make sense, right? And so, as I've played around with that, what I've come down to is every parent should raise children, or should raise kids to be globally engaged citizens. I feel like that's so important for our future because right now, especially, our world is becoming increasingly polarized and really tribal, and people are sticking with their own little groups. And this is unhealthy for our world. It really is. It would be one thing if we didn't have this modern technology. If we were 200 years ago and you're in Germany and I'm in, the U.S. and California, I wouldn't really know that you exist, right? And so it wouldn't really matter if we interact. But now it's so different. Our modern world deserves people who understand how to interact with people, with one another better. It's almost like the technology has gotten way ahead of us, especially the communications technology. So we as people need to catch up to that. And I think, while everybody needs to learn that, I think it's the young people that are growing up today. They're savvy with technology usually, but are they getting the people skills to really know how to relate well to others, especially others that are different from them? That's a big thing. So yeah, so what we want to do is we want to offer different kinds of training, resources, and obviously content that will help parents do that. And eventually, we hope to be able to lead small groups of families to different places, not for travel's sake, but for immersive experiences in different cultures. So, so they will really get to know what the people in a specific place are like, not just, live through on stereotypes. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's so great. I think this is really, a really great thing to educate, especially the young people. And I myself, I was born in Middle Asia, and I was raised between kind of two cultures, between the Russian and the German one. And I don't even know how it feels to be born in one city and live there for, I don't know, for 30, 40 years. And I can clearly see because I've traveled a lot and I've lived between cultures, that embracing different cultures and worldviews is really, it has enriched me, my life, and my art as a creative. And what do you think, how can other creatives use this, and how can they, how important is it for creativity and art to learn about other cultures?
Oh, I think it's like it basically triggers all sorts of new ideas and influences into your art. So whether you are a writer, whether you are a painter, graphic design, whatever, you are constantly absorbing different stimuli, and that influences what you make, what you create. Music, same. And I think, probably the biggest value is recognizing that your own way is not the only way. So like I would even say to you, Diana, you are clearly, you're a global citizen, even just by your own genetic makeup and your own experiential makeup. But it's important for you to learn to understand those people who are born in a single town, grow up in a single town, and, that's a culture too. That's a different way of thinking. And in some ways, I know it's happening in Europe, but in the United States, some of the biggest divides are between those people who are kind of more educated and cosmopolitan, and those who have had those single town experiences, oftentimes rural, not always, but they haven't really gone outside of their own, area. And, we can in our own minds assess value to that, but people don't always, how can I say? In some ways, it may not be their fault. That's what they grew up in. That's what they've come to expect life is about. And when they're feeling it's threatened, that's where the insecurity comes from. I have recently, not too long ago, I read the book by Ian Cron called The Road Back to You, which is just fascinating. It's about the Enneagram. And one of the things that really, really struck me, there are like 9 personality types that he goes over, and it's quite different from the Myers-Briggs. This is a very interesting kind of prism through which to look at yourself, look at other people and the world. And one of the types is called the loyalist. And the loyalist, I think that's type 6. The loyalist is a chief influencer in the loyalist's way of perceiving the world is fear. And they said that up to almost 50% of people fall into this category.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that fear is a really big thing that people deal with. And it's fear, all sorts of different kinds of fear, like, oh, the stock market's going to crash tomorrow, or nuclear, there's impending nuclear war, or I might get cancer tomorrow, or these kind of things are constantly on people's minds. And understanding that, I think, can help us just be more compassionate people, and we can express that again in our art as well. So, this isn't just about understanding other cultures and nationalities. It's also understanding that other people are different, and we need to kind of ratchet up our own empathy to understand that. Yeah.
Do you think we as writers, or I don't know, artists in general, we can work towards maybe eliminating this fear, or at least, I don't know, just making it a little bit less, if we have the audience, if we can write to those people, communicate with them in some way?
Yeah, I think so. I think we can provide a safe place, or a place of expression, or a place that's just kind of even a sacred space or something. Yes, I think so. And, that's another reason why I feel like platforms like Medium, for example, where people can write. I mean, writing and, painting or drawing, creating music. These are all very therapeutic things, right? And so I think that they do help in the process. They may not always be the full answer, but they're absolutely necessary, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great transition to your writing side, because you wrote an amazing book, which is basically a travel memoir. And I'm really curious why you decided to share this journey, because it's quite an intimate journey of your whole family, and in form of writing, and how you chose to tell this story, in which form. And you can
sure.
You can probably show your book so that people can see what the book is.
Right. So this is my book. It's called Jumping Out of the Mainstream: An American Family's Year in China. And we did take a year and live in China. There's also a few chapters that talk about some travels in the Philippines, Taiwan, and Japan. We talk a lot about why we did this. Like I said earlier, we always thought that we would raise our children overseas. That had been a goal of ours. And there's something about having kids that just makes everything kind of blur for a while, especially when you have them fairly close together. My first two children, I have three, but my first two children were 21 months apart. And I'm really impressed with these women who are blogging and running businesses when they've got little babies in their arms. That blows me away. That's a very hard thing to do. But anyway, I wrote this to answer your question. I felt maybe like anybody would feel. I felt that this was just needing to come out of me. And if it didn't, this experience might really get lost in our, and right now, by the way, I am helping my 85-year-old mentor. She's been kind of a surrogate grandmother to my friends. I'm helping her with her memoir. She's got her memoir written, and it's got a lot of work to be done on it, but once a week for about 3 hours, we're sitting in the little cafe at the senior center in her city nearby, and she's working on her giant Dell laptop and I'm working on my Mac. I taught her Google Docs. She's fascinated by the fact that I can change something in this document and she sees it over there. So I'm working on that with her. She, is basically creating something probably mostly for family and so on, but we want to publish it. But she's taking the whole span of her life. I'm not there yet. I don't think I could do that. But I felt like this was a singular experience. It really impacted all of us in different ways, which I explain about in the book. And, it was fun to write. I purposely made the chapters short so anyone could have this by their bedside and read 1, 2, or 3 chapters before going to bed and, just put it aside and know where to pick up from. I wanted, and the express reason for writing this is because one of the things that we want to do through Your Global Family is we want to encourage, motivate, and help other families to do this. And while I would say initially I want to focus on American families just because that's my closest market and everything, I think this could apply to people from all different countries. The thing is, generally speaking, America is really isolated compared to Europe. I mean, there's no question about it. We only have 2 borders, and there has long been this idea that America's built of people who think they're self-sufficient, which is not true. We need one another. But I think Americans need to understand that they're not at the center of the world. And I'm kind of on a mission to help them understand that. So, yeah. And on the back of my book, I have a Chinese proverb, which is 万事开头难, which means all things are hard until they become easy. And, whether it's art, whether it's writing a book, whether it's, building a family, taking them overseas, it seems so difficult when you're standing at the bottom of that mountain. Mm-hmm. But in the end, if you just take one step at a time forward, you get there, And this, before I wrote this, I had some time with each one of my children, and I really wanted to confirm this was a worthwhile experience for them. And all 3 have said across the board, this was something good for us. It was hard at the time, or at first I didn't want to go, or I didn't like this about China or this, but they all look back on it as a very special time with our family. And so, we're glad we did it, and I wanted to share it, and I hope to use it in my journey to encourage others to do the same. Yeah,
and I love this metaphor about making one step at a time, because I think it can be applied to writing a book as well, right? Because when you set out to write a book, you think it's so overwhelming. How can I do this?
Right.
And then you go one step at a time. How was your writing process? So did you apply some storytelling principles on a memoir, because it's still a real life story? So how did you use that to share your journey? How did you use storytelling for that?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at sort of a typical format of most stories, the hero's journey, I would say in this, the story kind of shows the resistance at the beginning. We know we need to do something. How do we do it? And we actually do get some help from a couple people. Very clearly, that comes out in the first few chapters, people that helped make it possible for us. And we got over there, and then, we're dealing with all sorts of things from, probably the hardest thing about the whole year was our then 14-year-old son, who he just went into a really kind of depressive funk for a season. It was a very dark time for him after he got over the initial excitement of being there. And, we do discuss that in the book and sort of what that was like. We have several adventures along the way, like we kind of lost our kids on the subway and, things like that happened. We also, in the process, we also got a chance to visit with a number of people that we knew in China and the Philippines, Taiwan, and Japan. It's funny, in the first draft of this, my husband said, there's too many instances of us sitting around at meals eating with people. And that's great, but we got to cut those out. So the process was, I actually did NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, in November of 2016. And that's when I got the bulk of this written. And then it was, of course, refining from there. I had a writing partner, and boy, she was working on a master's thesis, but meeting at 6 a.m. in the morning in a coffee shop was like awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's so great to have a writing partner. It's amazing.
Right. So true.
And I really want to talk about Medium as well, because over the last 8 months, you build up a huge following, which is 2.5K for 8 months. And how did you manage this? What's your secret for being successful on Medium?
Well, let me say one thing. I think part of it is just, wow, it just happened. I don't want to say luck, but I attribute it to a few things. One is that I joined a community of people that were doing the same things. And so on a weekly basis, we would share a post that we had put up on Medium, and then we'd go and we'd clap other people's posts up and read their posts and comment on them. So it's kind of like the idea of a rising tide. We'd lift, all of us would lift, the boats would all rise. So that was one element of it. Early in my Medium journey, I got picked up by a publication that had like around 30,000 readers. And that was in the day. Medium publications can't do this anymore, actually. But then, only a mere 8-9 months ago, then they were allowed to reach out to you if they saw your article and they thought, oh, this is good. They would reach out to you and they would say, hey, we'd like to include this in our publication. So someone did that. And that actually happened a few times. And that really helped my audience grow. But, the other thing is about that community that I was in, I took it and continue to take it very seriously. I don't just clap people up. I read their articles, I highlight, I'll leave a little comment, and I just felt like I want to be really generous in this process. And plus, honestly, I learned so much through what other people were writing, perspectives I hadn't even thought of, and so forth. So I think those things combined with keeping an eye on how your articles look, going for, and, being good with checking your grammar, not making errors, reading out loud before you post it reading out loud to yourself before you post it to catch any, awkward spots. And just for a long time, I was posting just once a week. And then in the spring, I tried a 30-day thing, and it got to be a little too much. Now, I'm actually on a little bit of a break right now, but now I think I'm going to settle into twice a week. I think that's a good schedule for me. And make sure you get them into publications. And I think it can grow, but you also got to be generous with your time on Medium too. You got to go read other people's things and comment and look for people you want to follow as well. So yeah, those are some of the things that I've done, and I guess they've paid off. There are not a lot of people writing about this particular area either. I do find occasionally I'm trying to find that sweet spot between my interest in intercultural relations and sort of how it'll make you a better person, i.e. personal development and self-help and self-development, because those are obviously very hot topics on Medium
Yeah.
and in life. So, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so great. Yeah, and I love your point about having a community and being part of a community and
Oh, yes.
helping
Very
people and being
important.
generous with other authors.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind
Mm-hmm.
of a intercultural communication as well, isn't it? Because you're communicating with those
Right.
writers all around the world and trying to help them and they
Mm-hmm.
help you, and
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing. So we're running
Yeah.
out of time, unfortunately, but if our listeners can have one takeaway from this interview about intercultural communications, what would it be?
It's a good question. I think the one takeaway is understand you do not have all the answers, and to have an open mind and an open heart to the way other people think as well, and consider how that can be part of your story as you go forward. So, yeah,
I love
that would
that.
be
I
it.
really love that. So, before we end, tell us where people can find you, your work, which website can they find you, your blog, or follow you? Yeah.
Sure, sure. So I am just finishing up a switch to the website yourglobalfamily.com. So that's where you can find me. I am also at Your Global Family on Facebook. There is a page for that. There's also a community, Your Global Family Network. Okay. Um, let's see. I'm on Instagram. I just started the Instagram account for this. So it's like a little lonely account, but I will grow it. And same with the Twitter account. I pretty much took down the other stuff and at Your Global Fam. It's either at Your Global Fam or at Your Global Family, depending on what was available. So yeah, those are the places.
Yeah, and
So
of course on
and
Amazon,
and and
right?
Amazon, my book is there under Caroline DePalatis and the Jumping Out of the Mainstream. Um, and my email is caroline@yourglobalfamily.com. So yeah, those are the
Yeah,
places.
it was so great. Thank you so
Super.
much for doing this. It was a pleasure.